Hello, you guys, and welcome into episode 22 of the C Team Pod. You might be noticing something different. It's just me today. Hopefully, I also sound a little bit clearer. I just got my new mic in. I'm still working through a little bit of the kinks on that, but hopefully, this sounds better and it sounds like a little bit of an upgrade. But today, we are going to be talking about the next team up on our rankings, and that's going to be the New England Patriots. We have them ranked 22nd. If you've missed the list so far, here's who we have. We have the Texans at 32, Jacksonville Jaguars coming in at 31, the Detroit Lions coming in at 30, Atlanta Falcons 29, Bears at 28, Giants 27. Then you go to the Carolina Panthers at 26, Commanders at 25, the Jets at 24. We just did the Seahawks last week at 23 with Dallas. And now at 22, the New England Patriots. And I know what you're thinking. What? The Patriots this low? This low? The team that, made the wild card round last year? Yeah, I think that they deserve to be this low. And we're going to kind of get into that towards the end of the show. But, coming up later, I thought I had the graphic done, but it is not. We're going to talk about some different things about this team. Obviously, we're going to touch on their free agency and their draft. I'm going to touch on the fact, all the weird stuff that's going on, with their coaching staff. We're going to talk about Mac Jones. Is he able to take the next step? I think, me having him this low kind of tells you my answer, but I'm going to go into a little bit more of that in depth. And then I'm going to kind of tell you what I think about the New England Patriots this year. But, starting off last season, I think last season, for them was very fluky. Very, very fluky, right? They go on a 7-game win streak in the middle of the season. And, they wound up going 10-7, not counting the playoffs, 10-8 if you want to count the playoff game. And they didn't beat very many good teams when you really look at it. And I know you can definitely look at like, well, they didn't play that many great teams, which I guess is true. But they were not good. I truly think they just weren't that good throughout the year, right? They start off losing to Miami. They beat New York. They lose to New Orleans and Tampa Bay. And this is right about the time that they start going on a roll. They beat the Texans, lose to the Cowboys. Then they win 7 straight. They win 7 straight, coming against, football powerhouses like the Jets, the Panthers, who at that point were falling apart. Cleveland Browns, who, obviously we know what's happening with them, and they mollywopped them. They kicked the crap out of them. They beat the Falcons. Obviously, they do have some impressive wins in there with, a team who almost made the playoffs, right? Like the Los Angeles Chargers. They beat the 1-seeded Tennessee Titans, and they beat the Buffalo Bills in that stretch. Then, they follow up that 7-game stretch. They lose to Indianapolis. They lose to Buffalo. They kick the crap out of the Jacksonville Jaguars. So you're starting to probably see a little bit of a theme here. They won multiple games by 30-plus points, but it was against the Jaguars, the Jaguars, the Browns, and the Jets. Not super impressive, in my opinion. Then they follow it up, lost to Miami, and then you look at their playoff loss, right? Wild card round. They lost 47-17, going up against the Buffalo Bills. I just think that their roster has a lot more holes than I think we really look at it, than when you kind of look at it from a surface level. I think that everyone, especially their wide receiving core last year, you look at that and they didn't really have anyone who's a standout, right? They had 2 receivers go at or above 800 yards. That's going to be Jacoby Myers and Kendrick Bourne. Both of those were career years for guys. I don't see that necessarily, I don't see that happening a whole lot. I don't see it repeating. You look last year, they brought in the 2 tight ends in free agency, right? They brought in Jonnu Smith and they brought in Hunter Henry. They didn't even get to, 900 yards combined. They were a couple yards short of that, but Jonnu Smith had 1 touchdown. Hunter Henry obviously was a touchdown machine. He got you 9, but they weren't great. Jonnu Smith was averaging less than 18.4, or he was averaging less than 19 receiving yards per game. Hunter Henry was only up at 35. I think that their offense left a lot to be desired. They beat up on crappy teams. And I think that's kind of what got them to the playoffs, right? I mean, you look and they, going into that game against the Jets that started that 7-game win streak, they were 2-4, and their only wins had come against Houston, who obviously was picking third in the draft this year, and the Jets, who were picking fourth. Those were their only wins before playing the Jets again. I think that they just got very lucky based off of a pretty poor schedule last year. But they I think that they 100% overperformed last year. They had a fairly weak schedule and they took advantage of it. And listen, there's nothing wrong with taking advantage of a weak schedule. Every team does it, right? I mean, they beat the teams that they were supposed to beat. I just think that this year, I think that they don't get, one of those wins at Buffalo, where Mac Jones had 19 receiving yards or passing yards, sorry, where he, attempted 3 passes the entire game. I just don't see that happening, to be quite honest with you. But talking about, the Patriots, their free agency decisions, they, I'm going to add some trades into this as well, right? They traded away N'Keal Harry. They traded for Devontae Parker, who's now going to be their number 1 wide receiver. I think that is a good move, but I think the problem that I'll kind of get to towards the end, I think that just speaking on the receiving core just a little bit, I think you just have a bunch of 2s and 3s. I don't think it's anything special. And this is coming from a Packers fan. My wide receiving core is full of 2s and 3s. I just don't think it's anything special. And, maybe you can make the argument that they don't need necessarily anything special, right? I mean, obviously, I'm not going to 100% compare, Mac Jones and Tom Brady, but there's some similarities. I don't think that they necessarily need these ones to go out and, execute a very simple offense. It's going to be an offense that, like last year, ran the ball a lot. As a team, they rushed for over 2,000 yards. They had 24 rushing touchdowns. Hell, Damian Harris had 15, touchdowns on his own. They were a team who running the ball, didn't turn the ball over. They fumbled 11 times. They had 11 fumbles, 3 of those coming from Mac Jones. They only lost 3 of those fumbles. I think, speaking on the rest of their free agency, obviously they lost they lost J.C. Jackson. They lost Kyle Van Noy. They lost Brandon King. They lost their center, Ted Karras, who, went to Cincinnati. And then they even lost some depth guys in there, right? Like Gunnar Olszewski, who I believe was a punt returner for him. They lost Brandon Bolden at running back, but I don't think that that's that huge of a loss for him. But then you look, and they were able to retain guys like Trenton Brown, Juwan Bentley, at inside linebacker. They were able to retain them, but they didn't add much, right? They added Lil Jordan Humphrey from the Saints. They added Terrence Mitchell, from the Houston Texans. They added Jabril Peppers, who's now on his 3rd stop in his young career. I just don't think they didn't do anything super special, in this period of free agency. And again, they went out, and I wasn't necessarily expecting them to, because that's not what they do, right? Last offseason, when they spent a ridiculous amount of money, that was out of the ordinary for them, right? And obviously, offensively it paid out, defensively it worked, right? With Matt Judon. He was a guy who was one of the best players on that defense, right? He came in, he wound up getting 12 and a half sacks. That's going to work. You pay a guy to go get that. But this year, no massive moves. And then that's when you start talking about, about their draft. Their draft was weird. Really, really weird, in my opinion, right? Cole Strange, I believe, at a UT Chattanooga, as their 1st round pick. They take him as a guard. Everyone saw it as a reach. And, I'm not a huge guy who does a whole lot of draft analysis or deep dives in on that, but I hadn't heard of him, or I guess I had heard of him, but I didn't think he was going to be a 1st round pick. I didn't even know if he was going to be a 2nd round pick. I think it's from a team who does a lot of weird drafting. I think that it was it was just, I guess, normal for them, but from an outsider standpoint, I didn't like the draft. Especially, well, obviously the 1st round pick, right, with Cole Strange. I think they might have reached a little bit on Tyquan Thornton, right? They picked him at pick 18 in the second round, which was 50th overall, right? I think, I think they probably could have waited on him. Maybe not a whole lot, but I think they could have waited for sure. Then they go and, in the final pick of, I believe, the fourth round, they go out there and they get a quarterback, another quarterback. Really? I don't get it. I just don't get it. Do you trust Mac Jones to be the guy or not? I don't. So I guess I get it, but his predecessor, Mac Jones's predecessor, if he doesn't work out, it's not going to be a fourth round pick. I realize, Tom Brady was a 6th round pick. He was a 7th round pick, whatever it is. That's not happening again. It's not going to happen. It only happens every once in a while, right? You look at a middle to late round guy, right? Tom Brady, Russell Wilson. There's a handful of those guys who wind up being, franchise quarterbacks. I don't think they got one. I think it was probably a waste of a draft pick. Especially, you look at, at their roster for this year, and I don't know. It really just doesn't make sense to me, right? You still have Brian Hoyer. So, I guess you needed someone for depth, maybe, but Brian Hoyer's listed second on your depth chart. Were you thinking of not bringing him back? I don't know. I think their free agency and their draft was confusing. The draft especially. It was very confusing. And again, Belichick's not a guy who's going to go out there and spend a lot of draft capital on wide receivers, right? Obviously, he didn't really do that much in the years with Tom Brady. He didn't, the one time he did, they just traded away. They traded away N'Keal Harry when they drafted, or after they drafted him, I believe 2019 or 2018. So, I just didn't understand their draft, to be quite honest with you. And another thing I don't understand is what the hell is going on with their coaching staff, their coordinator position specifically. You look and as their coordinators, they haven't named official titles for their offensive coordinator, their defensive coordinator. They haven't done that. According to CBS, they haven't done that the past 4 seasons. So I guess that's not necessarily something that's out of the ordinary, but Matt Patricia and Joe Judge are going to kind of tag team the offense, is what it looks like, or one of them's going to get the offense. They don't have Matt Patricia as a defensive head coach. He is. I don't think he has any, I don't think he has any sort of experience in the, in the offense, on the offensive side of the ball. And Joe Judge is a special teams guy. I truly think they just did not have a plan for losing Josh McDaniels. I think that there was some sort of, obviously, Josh McDaniels, he had his, first go around, right, in Denver. Then after that, he comes back to New England, and then he gets a second opportunity, or agreed to a second opportunity with the Indianapolis Colts, and they announced it, and then he said no, right? Something had to have happened in that in a meeting with Belichick or Robert Kraft or both, or someone, with a handshake agreement that when Belichick decides to hang it up, that's going to be his gig, right? But he left him high and dry. Now they don't even have an offensive coordinator. It's wild. It's wild to me. I think especially because Steve Belichick's probably going to be calling the defense, right? I believe he's done that the past year or two, couple of years. I'm just, to be honest, very confused by what their strategy is in not having an offensive coordinator. You're not throwing anybody off. I mean, I guess you are, but not in the way that matters or counts. It's not some trickery like you have 2 fantastic offensive minds and you don't know which one you're going to go with. You have 2 non-offensive minds, which you're having compete maybe for the starting job as your offensive coordinator. again, I think Nick Wright on First Things First, so I'm not plagiarizing. I think he came out and said there's a couple different ways that, either they've both been very good, right? And you can't make a decision on them. Not very likely, right? Not super likely, I don't think. Especially from I guess they have scored, 20 plus points in both of their preseason games, but they're preseason games. I don't know what you're going to learn necessarily from that, unless, you like the sequencing, you like their play calling, but it's just a very confusing. That's kind of the theme of this, so far today in terms of, their free agency moves. Obviously they're not going to cash out and pay JC Jackson. I get that. The Chargers paid him a lot of money. And that's money that, generally the Patriots don't dole out except for last year. Confusing. Very, very confusing. But something I'm not as confused about is, can Mac Jones take that next step and, vault himself into being a top 10 quarterback? The answer is no. The answer truly is no. I think when you look at that, I think as you went down the season, he wasn't, the reason you were winning some of these games, right? I mean, I think 1 touchdown, 1 interception in that win against Houston. Obviously, he had an okay game against Dallas, but he gave up that pick 6 to Trayvon Diggs, although, again, he did rebound well and targeted Diggs and got the touchdown to tie the game back up pre-overtime, or I believe give them the lead, forcing Dallas to go get a field goal. But his best game of the season, at least statistically, or his best 2, he had 3 touchdowns and no picks against Jacksonville and against the Browns. You're in the AFC, but you're going to face way better competition than the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Cleveland Browns. Mac Jones, I don't see it, especially in an era where I think you have to swing at quarterback. And this is kind of my problem with the Steelers too. You got to take a swing at quarterback. You have to. The teams who are taking swings, it's going to turn out good for them, right? You look just recently, right? Whether that's through free agency or the draft, right? Here's some teams who've taken some swings at quarterback. The LA Rams, they took a swing on Matthew Stafford, and it's not as much of a swing, obviously, but they gave up a lot of draft capital. To go get a quarterback who they thought was going to be able to lead them to a Super Bowl, and he did. And they won a Super Bowl, and they got a ring out of it. Then you go back, and it's Tom Brady. Tom Brady for the Buccaneers, right? That was a huge swing. After that, right, Patrick Mahomes, that was a swing. Josh Allen, that was a swing. These teams are swinging. They're swinging. And the Patriots and the Steelers, they're standing pat. They are. Mac Jones is not, he's an NFL caliber quarterback in terms of, they were able to plug and play him. And again, the team had success. Right? But he was not the reason that they won some of these games. He was horrible against the Saints last year. Threw 3 picks, 51 attempts. He was averaging 5.3 yards per attempt. They had him throw the ball 50 times. I don't think it's a coincidence that one of their wins came when he threw the ball 3 times against Buffalo. He threw the ball 3 times for 19 yards. They took the ball out of his hands. And this is a narrative that gets beaten to the ground, but you think, just looking at that game, they weren't going to, the ball wasn't going to be taken out of Josh Allen's hands, was it? The ball wasn't going to be taken, if that's that you're playing that exact same game, that ball's not going to be taken out of Aaron Rodgers' hands, Patrick Mahomes' hands, Russell Wilson's hands. It's not going to be taken out of most players in the league. It's not going to be taken out of their hands. Hell, Josh Allen threw the ball 30 times, and they were willing to live and die on that sword. They were willing to live and die with whatever Josh Allen was going to do. 50% completion percentage. He had a lower yards yards per attempt than Mac Jones, but Mac Jones came out there, and I'm not the biggest fan of this stat, but he had a QBR of 4. He had a QBR of 4. 50's average. 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. I think that his floor is really high, but his ceiling's really low. I think that this seemed like a situation where everyone thought it was so perfect because, he'd come in here and he would just, be the next Tom Brady. And I still think you see a lot of people who think that that's going to be the way it's going to go. But it's not. That's not. And even if you look at it, Tom Brady didn't get a start. He sat for a little bit. He sat behind Drew Bledsoe. I think that the Mac Jones, he's going to be solid, and I think he's going to be a starting quarterback in this league for a while, and I think he's going to be a starting quarterback for the Patriots for a while. But I truly think that they had an opportunity, to do something to make a splash in that draft, right? Obviously, I don't think you were going to be able to trade up to 1, obviously, to get Trevor Lawrence. You weren't going to be able to trade up to 2 to get Zach Wilson. They traded up to 3 for Trey Lance. Could have taken a risk somewhere, but instead they played it safe. They could have just doled out a little bit of extra money, for Tom Brady. I would have just way rather done that a couple of years ago. And then, you can use that pick on a player who's going to help your team win, not keep your team as is, right? And especially, moving into, the expectations for the Patriots, right? Moving into those expectations, it's why I don't have them finishing very well. I don't. They haven't shown me much of anything, to be quite honest with you. To think that they're going to go out there. Every team in their division got better except for them. They're the only team who got worse. Significantly worse, right? They lost J.C. Jackson. He's one of the highest paid corners in the game now. You just look across the division, right? The Jets, they added a bunch. And obviously Zach Wilson's injury, that's tough for them. But they got a lot better. They made some free agency signings that were really good. They made some draft picks that were fantastic. They were the winner of the draft. They had 3. They wound up getting 3 first-round picks. Took Sauce Gardner because he fell to him, right? Took Garrett Wilson, and then got Jeremiah Johnson late in the first round. Then they got Breece Hall. They had a fantastic draft. Then you move over to the Dolphins. The Dolphins traded for Tyreek Hill. The Dolphins tried again. I think Connor Williams is one of the worst starting linemen, in the league, but they tried to upgrade their offensive line. The Bills, obviously, they got better. They had a good draft. They added a corner. They're going to be getting their, Tre'Davious White back. That's a huge boost for them. They added Von Miller. They added one of the best pass rushers in the league. They got better. All 3 teams in that division got better except for the Patriots. Right? Here's the Patriots' only saving grace, because I haven't ranked this low, but again, these are power rankings, right? These are power rankings. They're not, record predictions. We'll have that going later. But they're only saving grace because I think they'll have a decent record. They get a lot of layups, right? I think that they'll probably split with Miami because I just don't buy a whole lot into Tua. And they get lucky that they're playing the NFC North. But that's 2-2 probably at best for them. I think that Green Bay and Minnesota probably get the best of them. You look at their schedule, right? They have to face Buffalo twice, 2 losses, easily. They've faced Vegas, lost. They faced the Cincinnati Bengals, lost. They faced the Arizona Cardinals. That's probably a loss. I think, Zach Wilson, they're he's probably, I'm just going to say he misses the first, let's just say first 8 weeks of the season. So he misses that first matchup against the Patriots. I think coming on, I think they probably win that matchup in week 11. The Jets do. I think that the Patriots lose that. I think that they probably, they probably lose to Indianapolis, who I'm pretty high on this year. I truly think that in a game where you have to get better every year. You can't bring, the Buccaneers last year brought back all 22 starters from the Super Bowl. They stayed the same. They didn't get better. And what happened? They got knocked out in the divisional round, right? They got knocked out by the Rams. None of us are shocked, right? I don't think anyone was. You have to get better. You can't get worse, and you can't stay the same. The only way you can stay the same or get maybe even a little worse is if you're just expecting someone to take a massive jump, or if you were, I guess, already that good, right? Because I can already see this clip getting, when I reveal how high the Packers are, you can't stay the same or get worse and, still be that good. They have Aaron Rodgers, the quarterback. That's your coverall. That's your blanket. That's what saves you. And the Patriots, they have a quarterback. They have a guy who's going to probably, for his entire career, he'll be top 20. But I mean, you spent a massive, or you spent a first round pick on a guy who, you probably could have found. You probably could have got a guy who would have done just as good. Hell, the Texans got Davis Mills. I think Davis Mills was probably the best rookie quarterback last year. When you truly look at it, I think Davis Mills was the best rookie quarterback as opposed to Mac Jones. Obviously, I think Trevor Lawrence is going to wind up being the best. Obviously, I'm a huge Trevor Lawrence fan. And obviously, my rankings having them, finishing, having them be one of the worst teams, 31 in the league. That doesn't say much about him, but, you look and compare Mac Jones and Davis Mills last year, and very similar. Very, very similar. Davis Mills, 66.8% completion percentage. Mac Jones just one completion percentage point higher. Touchdown to interception ratio, I think, or Mac has him beat, right? Mac had 22 touchdowns to 13 picks. Davis Mills had 16 to 10, but who was Davis Mills working with? He was working with nobody. He was working with absolutely nobody last year. Again, I'll say it one more time. In a league where you have to get better, you have to get better every single year. You have to have a franchise quarterback. You have to have a top tier quarterback every single year if you truly want an opportunity to win a championship. There's no more of this. There's no more. Trent Dilfer doesn't happen anymore. Rich Gannon doesn't happen anymore. You're not going to be able to bring a lower half quarterback and put him on a team and expect to go out there and compete for a Super Bowl. And you can't do that in a division with Josh Allen, Zach Wilson. Again, I'm not super high on Tua, but they've loaded that offense up with weapons, obviously, right? Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill, even brought in, they got rid of Devontae Parker. They brought in Cedric Wilson. It's another way they got better. Well, thank you guys for tuning into a very lonely, almost, episode of the C-Team Pod. We are going to have a couple more episodes coming out tonight. This one happened at 5. I think I started at 5:05-ish. Started at 5:05. And just getting over now at 5:35. I think at 7:30 we have our next one. And we are going to be revealing the team that I have ranked 20th. Right? 20th? 21st. There we go. 21st in our rankings. And that's going to be the Minnesota Vikings. It's going to be the Minnesota Vikings. I'm excited to, me and my buddy Marcus, we went back and forth about the Vikings. Oh, not back and forth. We crapped on the Vikings for a very long time. It's gonna be another solo one, but I think that again at 7:30, join back. We're gonna be talking about the Vikings. I'm gonna be going in. I think I've seen a couple people saying that they're gonna win the division, and I'm gonna tell you it's not even gonna be close. So thank you guys for tuning into the C Team Pod. You can find me on Instagram at Emmitt Sevores. You can find Dallas, who's not here, at Coach Dallas Wick on Twitter, at Dallas.Wick on Instagram. And then follow our socials at the C Team Pod on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, pretty much anything you can think of for more of our content and our clips. Thank you guys for tuning in, and I'll see you in the